The downside of the internet. You are going to listen to 3 people stating their opinions on the downside of the internet. The language they use is highly advanced. So, grab a dictionary and take notes of all the new words you come across. By the end of this video, you will have learned a lot. Speaker 1.
The advent of the internet is, without doubt, one of the most transformative developments in human history. It has revolutionized communication, democratized access to information, and brought the world closer together in ways previously unimaginable. Yet, for all its marvels, I find myself increasingly concerned about the more insidious effects this technology is having on our intellectual and social well-being. As with any tool of immense power, the internet, too, has a darker side that, if left unchecked, could prove to be detrimental to the very fabric of our society. In the first place, let us consider the impact of the internet on the quality of thought. It seems undeniable that the vastness of information available online has the potential to enlighten and educate. However, what we have instead witnessed is a profound fragmentation of attention. The constant bombardment of stimuli, endless notifications, clickbait articles, and social media updates has undermined our capacity for sustained concentration. We flit from one web page to another, never lingering long enough to engage deeply with any single idea. I have often pondered, somewhat cynically, whether the internet has made it easier to know a little about everything and nothing in particular. Were we to continue down this path, we shall have forsaken the very intellectual rigor that underpins critical thought. One thing is for sure, one should emphasize what might otherwise be overlooked. Never before has the average person had such vast access to knowledge, and yet rarely has it been used to deepen wisdom. We find ourselves, paradoxically, more informed, but less wise. For what good is the ability to Google facts when we lack the mental discipline to process and evaluate them critically? I fear that future generations, raised in this digital milieu, will have lost the ability to engage with complex ideas in a manner that promotes real understanding. By the time they reach adulthood, they may already have developed an intellect superficial in its grasp, hastily formed, and easily manipulated. Another concerning aspect of the internet is its effect on human interaction. While it is often touted as a medium that connects us, I would argue that it has, in many cases, achieved precisely the opposite. Online platforms, though ostensibly designed to foster communication, often encourage shallow exchanges devoid of real substance. In face-to-face conversation, nuance, tone, and body language allow for a level of empathy and understanding that text on a screen simply cannot replicate. What we have now is a generation that might have gained thousands of virtual friends, but whose ability to form deep, meaningful relationships has been significantly diminished. Moreover, the anonymity afforded by the internet has given rise to behaviors that would have been unthinkable in previous eras. The civility that was once the hallmark of public discourse has been eroded by the ease with which individuals can spew vitriol and hatred without consequence. It is a sad reflection of our times that the internet, which could have been a platform for thoughtful dialogue, has often descended into a battleground for insults and misinformation. By the time we come to realize the full extent of this degradation of discourse, it will already have become a deeply ingrained feature of our digital age. Turning now to the matter of privacy, one cannot overlook the internet's role in eroding personal freedoms. In the past, one's private life was, for the most part, sacrosanct. Today, however, we live in an era where data is a commodity, traded and sold by corporations that know more about us than we know about ourselves. The irony is that the very tool that promised to empower individuals has, in many ways, left them more vulnerable than ever. Future generations will look back and wonder how we allowed ourselves to become so complacent, so willing to surrender our privacy for the sake of convenience. By the time we fully grasp the ramifications of this digital age, we will likely have entered a world in which privacy, as we once understood it, will have vanished entirely. And yet, few seem alarmed. As the proverb goes, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. It would be remiss of me to suggest that the internet is an unmitigated evil. Indeed, there are ways in which it has enriched our lives. Yet I cannot shake the feeling that we have allowed it to dominate us in ways that were never intended. What could have been a tool for enlightenment and unity has, in many respects, become a source of distraction, division, and control. If we are to mitigate these dangers, we must first recognize them for what they are. Otherwise, by the time we realize the true cost of the internet, it may already have claimed more than we ever bargained for. In conclusion,
Speaker 2.
As one reflects on the nature of the Internet, a tool celebrated for its boundless capacity to disseminate information and connect individuals, it is imperative to temper such enthusiasm with critical reflection. For the Internet, while appearing as a modern manifestation of human freedom and ingenuity, harbours within it many of the same pitfalls that have ensnared mankind throughout history. The Internet, like any medium of knowledge, is not inherently virtuous or corrupt. Rather, its moral value lies in the manner in which it is used. It is this dimension of human nature, our inclinations, desires and weaknesses, that makes the Internet both a blessing and a curse. In understanding the downside of the Internet, one must begin by examining the human condition itself. The essence of human beings, as I have long posited, is that we are creatures governed by desires and emotions, affects, as I term them. Our pursuit of knowledge is often driven by these affects, but without a clear understanding of what is good or true, we may easily be led astray. The Internet, with its seemingly infinite reservoir of information, does not necessarily guide us toward truth. It merely provides content, and herein lies the first danger. Without discernment and understanding, the Internet can serve to amplify ignorance rather than dispel it. For many, the vastness of the Internet creates the illusion that knowledge is easily attainable, that truth is but a click away. Yet such knowledge is often superficial, lacking the rigor and depth required for true understanding. When we mistake information for wisdom, we fall prey to a kind of intellectual laziness, content to skim the surface rather than engage in the deep methodical thinking that true knowledge demands. The Internet, in this sense, encourages a passive consumption of ideas rather than an active engagement with them. Moreover, the Internet is not immune to the forces of human passion. We see how quickly individuals are swept up in the waves of opinion, how easily falsehoods can spread, and how division is often fomented rather than unity. This arises from our natural inclination toward partiality and prejudice, traits that, when left unchecked, can lead to discord. Online, people are frequently driven by the basest of emotions, fear, anger, and pride, rather than reason. Echo chambers emerge, reinforcing existing biases and creating a fragmented world of conflicting beliefs. In such an environment, the pursuit of truth becomes secondary to the gratification of emotional impulses. Furthermore, the Internet has not only reshaped the way we interact with knowledge, but also with each other. Communication, once the bedrock of human connection, is often reduced to fleeting interactions that lack substance. The depth of face-to-face encounters, where one might read the nuance of expression or tone, is replaced by impersonal and hurried exchanges. Our relationships become more tenuous, and the bonds that once required effort to maintain are now sustained by the bare minimum of engagement. Thus, the internet fosters a kind of isolation masked as connectivity, a paradox that lies at the heart of its downside. Nevertheless, it is not the internet itself that is the root of these problems, but rather the way in which it interacts with our nature. If human beings were guided purely by reason, the internet could indeed be a tool for enlightenment. However, we are not such creatures. Our affects, our desires, fears and passions shape how we use this technology, often leading us down paths that are far from beneficial. Without the cultivation of understanding and self-awareness, the internet becomes a reflection of our basest instincts rather than our highest aspirations. In conclusion, while the internet holds the potential for great good, it also mirrors the frailties of the human condition. It amplifies both our capacity for knowledge and our susceptibility to ignorance, our desire for connection and our tendency toward isolation. To mitigate the downside of the internet, one must strive to engage with it through the lens of reason and understanding, recognizing its power while also being mindful of its dangers. Only then can we hope to use it not as a source of distraction or division, but as a tool for the betterment of ourselves and society.
Speaker 3.
To speak of the internet is to speak of power. We must understand that the internet is not merely a neutral tool for the transmission of information. Rather, it is an apparatus through which power is exercised, a network that subtly disciplines and governs our behaviors, thoughts, and social interactions. The internet, in all its ubiquity, operates as a modern panopticon, a space where we are simultaneously subjects and objects of surveillance, constantly participating in the production and consumption of knowledge, while being monitored and controlled in ways we may not fully recognize. From the outset, we must question the assumption that the internet liberates us by granting access to information. While it is true that we now possess unprecedented access to vast amounts of data, the relationship between knowledge and power is far more complex. Information does not flow freely in the digital age. It is curated, manipulated, and often deployed as a means of governance. Those who control the platforms, the tech giants, governments, and algorithms, you name it, also control the narratives we are exposed to. Thus, the internet, far from being a space of democratic freedom, becomes a mechanism for controlling what we see, how we think, and how we act. Consider the concept of surveillance, which has evolved in the digital era into something far more insidious than the physical observation that can be found in the disciplinary institutions of prisons or schools. On the internet, we are watched not by guards or teachers, but by algorithms. Our every click, every search query, every post is recorded, categorized, and used to construct a profile of who we are. This data is then used to predict and shape our behavior. In this sense, the internet has created a system of biopolitical control that extends into the most intimate aspects of our lives. What we must recognize is that the internet has reconfigured the relationship between the individual and the structures of power. We are no longer passive recipients of information, but active participants in our own surveillance. By using the internet, we willingly offer up personal data, enabling corporations and governments to exercise control over our actions, desires, and even our identities. This voluntary submission to constant observation is the most subtle form of power, a power that does not need to force itself upon us, but one that we engage in willingly, even eagerly. But surveillance is not the only mechanism of power at play. The internet also produces regimes of truth, systems of knowledge that dictate what is accepted as truth, what is valued as important, and what is dismissed as irrelevant. These regimes of truth are not neutral. They are constructed through power relations. Social media platforms, for example, determine what content is visible, what narratives are amplified, and which voices are silenced. The algorithms that govern these platforms are designed not to foster open debate but to keep us engaged, feeding us content that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs and biases, creating echo chambers where dissenting opinions are drowned out. In this way, the Internet functions as a space of exclusion as much as inclusion, reinforcing dominant ideologies while marginalizing alternative viewpoints. Moreover, the Internet has also transformed the nature of labor, blurring the boundaries between work and leisure. Platforms like social media, content creation sites, and even gig economy apps commodify our attention, our time, and our very identities. We are not only consumers of content but producers as well, often without realizing the extent to which our participation serves capitalist interests. Every post, every comment, every like contributes to the accumulation of data that is monetized by corporations. The Internet thus becomes a site of economic exploitation, where the line between voluntary participation and coerced labor becomes increasingly unclear. However, it is not merely the economic and political dimensions of the Internet that are of concern. The Internet has also reshaped the ways in which we interact with ourselves and others. Our subjectivities are no longer formed solely through interpersonal relationships but are increasingly mediated through digital technologies. We curate our identities online, presenting versions of ourselves that conform to societal expectations, seeking validation through likes, shares, and comments. This constant need for external validation erodes the sense of self that is independent of societal approval, creating subjects who are increasingly fragmented, insecure, and dependent on the gaze of others for affirmation. The downside of the Internet, then, is not simply a matter of privacy invasion or misinformation. It is a profound restructuring of power relations, one that disciplines us in ways we are only beginning to understand. It is a mechanism of control that operates not through overt repression but through the subtle shaping of desires, behaviors, and identities. To understand the Internet is to understand the mechanisms of power that govern our contemporary lives. It is to recognize that we are not free actors in a digital utopia but subjects within a system of control that operates at the level of both individual subjectivity and global politics. In conclusion, the Internet's promise of freedom and democratization must be critically examined through the lens of power. We must ask ourselves, who controls the flow of information? Who benefits from our participation in this digital world? And what does it mean to be a subject in an era where we are constantly observed, manipulated, and governed by forces that often remain invisible? If we are to mitigate the downsides of the Internet, we must first recognize the power structures it sustains and develop strategies for resisting its more insidious forms of control.
Thank you for listening to English Audio Lounge. We hope you have enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more audio stories and video classes to improve your English.